Check. Seems pretty good. Cool. What is up, team, and welcome back to another episode of the Technical Foul Podcast. You're joined by just two of us today. I'm Jack Anderson, and to my right is JP Pusilowski. How are we doing today, JP?
I'm doing fine.
Sure.
My tummy hurts. I think that's the biggest of the updates for me.
That's tough.
Yeah.
I'm a little
My
under
stomach feels bad.
the weather myself, so I went down at College Station this weekend, right? And we get there, and Mr. Carter comes in that first night and is sick. So I think I just got whatever he has. But it's not like the flu or anything like that. It's just kind of a common cold. So if I sound a little off today, that would be why, and I apologize. But we'll bounce back. Got to be ready for tonight regardless.
Agreed.
The end is here, and potentially.
I mean, hopefully not.
I'll phrase it this way. We're talking about intramural basketball. This is both our final season of intramural basketball, and playoffs are tonight. The end this week is the end.
This is
whenever it ends, whenever we lose, that'll be it. A very unillustrious intramural basketball career from the both of us.
Yeah.
Would this be our first playoff win?
Would it be your first
My
playoff
first playoff win? Sure.
My freshman year, we technically won a playoff game.
Sure.
It was our only win that season as well.
That's actually crazy.
Everyone made the playoffs for whatever reason that year, and we beat some. It was all combined, so we played a fraternity, and we beat their B team.
Gotcha.
And I think it was 21-17. It was some kind of football score.
Yeah, just no buckets.
Yeah, no buckets were made in that game whatsoever. But it was an iconic win. I would argue. I mean, it was the first win in Slugs history, Banana Slugs history.
That's true, actually.
And I would argue probably the most important because it felt like it.
Big bonding moment there.
Yeah, it laid the groundworks of what became a winning culture and one of the better intramural programs on this campus.
Three rings across the past 4 years. Two softball and a volleyball.
2 softball and a volleyball. Yes.
Yep.
Plenty of regular season flag football wins. No
Yep.
postseason wins.
Couldn't get that monkey off our back, sadly.
Like the Green Bay Packers, who we'll talk about today,
Yeah.
and mediocre basketball. I think is probably the way to put it there. But yeah, it'll end this week. I haven't put much thought into that. My end. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but my end already occurred for me when I played my final basketball game my senior year of high school.
That makes perfect sense.
So I don't think I'm holding a lot of emotion in tonight's game, other than wanting to win.
I want to win. I've yet to score a point this season, so I'd like to score a point.
Important. Yeah.
That's really where I'm at. It's not a huge deal regardless, and I still have soccer, so I still have that. It's like the last thing this spring.
Sick.
But anyway, we're here. NFC Offseason Primers. 4 teams, obviously. There's 4 teams in the NFC North. Chicago, Detroit, Green Bay, Minnesota. All good teams, I would say. All teams just kind of looking generally that have playoff expectations next year and probably really higher expectations than just making the playoffs. We'll get into whether we think that's warranted or not and whether that's realistic or not. But I can take us away. I can start with Minnesota.
Yeah, it was the winningest division in football.
Yeah.
All 4 teams finished with an above 500 record. And yeah, all 4 teams look kind of poised to potentially win the division again. And we'll start with Minnesota.
Yeah. So Minnesota, looking back to last year very briefly, they went 9-8, finished 1 game above 500. And their season was marred by injuries and quarterback issues, specifically the quarterback issues. 9, J.J. McCarthy was hurt a lot, and he was bad when he played. And people that stepped in weren't much better. We got Carson Wentz for a couple weeks. He didn't look great. Max Brosmer, undrafted, I believe, or he's 7th round.
I think he's undrafted. He was undrafted.
Okay, that's what I thought. He played. He looked horrible. And so, honestly, the fact they won 9 games is pretty impressive considering that. And really quickly, I'll hand out some MVPs for last year. Just the team MVP. I'm going to go and give it to Justin Jefferson. Not a good year from his standards, but still cracked 1,000 yards despite the quarterback issues I just mentioned. Had a pretty good season. I initially wanted to give it to a defender, so I'd be interested to see if there's a defender you would want to give it to because, really, their defense put in a lot of work for this team to win games. But it felt like it was more just a really good unit and not like, oh, wow, there's a Micah Parsons on this team or a Myles Garrett on this team or, Pat Surtain on this team. It was just kind of like, at least looking at the numbers and even like, thinking back to when I watched them play, there was no one that was like, oh, man, they just were locked in week and week out. So I wanted to give it to Jay Jettas.
Yeah, I think numbers-wise is the very fair point. They were very spread across. 4 guys with 6 or more sacks this year, 5 guys with 10 or more quarterback hits this year. Tackles are spread across the board. They had 3 different DBs with 2 interceptions. I think Justin Jefferson is a very fair pick for the MVP. They did not get kind of what they wanted out of their running game, and T.J. Hawkinson didn't have a great year. Obviously, I think they kind of wanted J.J. McCarthy, 9, to be the MVP. If there's which I'm curious to see how that'll pan out with the sphere of sports as our light flickers at us. I hope that doesn't look bad on video.
I'm going to go see if I can get it to stop. It doesn't look like it's making a difference there, but just in case, I'm going to go check. You keep talking.
I'm curious to see if some of we know one, if Chromie ends up showing up today, or if Chromie watches this back, I'd love to hear his opinion on, do people take the J.J. McCarthy went 6-4 last year as a way of describing that he played well when he, in reality, was 11 touchdowns and 12 picks for 163 yards per game. That's 37 yards below 200, so meaning he averaged a Bryce Young game every time he played. Now, he had some bright moments.
Sure.
The win at Detroit, obviously the win at the start of the year at Chicago, and those, I think, are more like building blocks for them going forward he played pretty well in division when he played his divisional opponents. And that even includes technically a win the final week of the year against Green Bay when Green Bay sat all their starters.
Clayton Tune was their quarterback. So
yeah, I wonder how many people will take the J.J. McCarthy defense, Minnesota fans or Michigan fans or just NFL people, in terms of trying to build this team going forward. That he was 6-4 this year. He didn't play that bad. It's kind of a similar argument that people are trying to have with Bryce Young, in that he didn't play that bad. He won the division.
Yeah.
No, he played bad all year.
They just still happened to win the division.
Yeah, and so much of the fact that JJ was drafted so high and Bryce was the number 1 overall pick, and they were great in college, and JJ won a national championship and whatnot. They want to continue to hold on to him and see a way brighter future than a lot of realistic fans do. So, JJ's only started 1 year. It will be him going into year 3, but I would push back on pretty much all of those people that, just like I'm pushing back on people who are trying to defend Bryce Young right now.
Yeah. And we'll circle back around to that when we kind of wrap it up with the 2026 goal. He'll be a big part of that, I imagine. And then for 2025 unsung, Jalen Redmond, gave it to him, defensive tackle. 6 sacks. He was one of the guys you mentioned that was kind of riding that cluster. Very impactful in the run game. Defensive tackles in general are pretty unheralded unless you're like Aaron Donald or somebody that just like clearly takes it to the next level. But they typically don't rack up stats. They don't make the wow plays. But he played a ton of snaps in the middle, was always available, and just impactful week in, week out. So I give it to him.
Yeah, the defensive tackles, you only remember like the ones with the cool names or the big personalities, like B.J. Raji of the Green Bay Packers, or like Poona Ford is someone that comes to mind right now. I think that's a fair shout for unsung hero. I thought the way Dallas Turner played this year was really good as well. I mean, he's a former first-round pick, and it was year 2 for him, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, year 2 for him. He had 8 sacks this year, led the team in sacks, but he's more of a known commodity. He also played at Sanders' favorite college, Alabama. So I'm
if he was
fine
here,
with the
give a big
Jalen
old
Redmond.
roll tide, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Of course he would.
Always. Okay, moving on more towards next season. No big coaching changes. Top guys all stay the same in terms of head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Now, unless I'm mistaken, they did get rid of the general manager. He got let go after a couple not great drafts in a row. Maybe people are upset about the J.J. McCarthy thing, not keeping Sam Darnold, but he's out the door, and so that position will have to be filled. And so who knows what the philosophy in-house changes with the new guy or how that changes. I'm not going to speak on it too much because we don't know who the new guy is yet, and what that change is going to be or how that's going to affect things. But if you have anything on that, you're welcome to add it in. If not, I'll keep moving.
No, it kind of felt like that was a consensus opinion in-house.
Yeah.
That he was to be moved on from.
Yep. Just simply hadn't drafted well enough, and that's kind of the biggest thing for the GM, among other issues. But yeah. Talking about the draft, going into this year's draft, they have the 18th overall pick, and they have some big needs, DB being one of them. I would like to see them get some interior offensive line help. I think that would be needed, partially just because it's not the best group, but also injuries. Their offensive line sustained a lot of injuries last year, so even if you got a guy, their tackles are set, but you got a guy that could bounce out to tackle if one of those guys get hurt again, something like that. They also need running back really bad, in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of the Jordan Mason, Aaron Jones combo. They're not going to take that in the first round with that 18th overall pick. Never say never, but I'm going to say they're not. There's just no shot. There's no one there for them to take. So they'll have to address that later or in free agency. A couple guys I see them taking within that 18 range, and Avion Terrell, corner out of Clemson. He's good. Maybe Jermod McCoy's there, someone like that. If they do just want to beef up their front seven, because I could see them doing that as well. Maybe you go a Hakeem Messidor. I feel like that's a little high. There's the defensive tackle from Ohio State, Caden McDonald. So I'm thinking if they could do something like that. C.J. Allen from Georgia, if they like him. They have a couple different options there. But I personally would go corner, whether it's Avion Terrell, Jermon McCoy, whoever ends up falling there. Mansour Delane will almost definitely be off the board. Jerron McCoy will probably be off the board too, so maybe it is just kind of Avion Terrell. But what are your thoughts in terms of what they should do with the 18th overall pick?
I'm fine with corner, and I think it'll be a good fit. I would be surprised if Mansour Delane had fallen that far, but I don't think the separation between him, Gerard McCoy, and Avion Terrell is that drastic to where drafting one of those guys at 18 is a bad value pick. I do think they should address running back as well, and running back can be addressed at any point in the draft. Now, this year's class is not necessarily elite. There's really Jeremiah Love, who people view as the best prospect in the draft. Then there's his counterpart, Jadarian Price, out of Notre Dame, and then you have the 2 Penn State running backs. Outside of that, there's really not one that pops off for you. But then again, if you draft a guy who's just productive, give him the right snaps, and have better health of the offensive line, I do think really anybody at running back can play well. Kyle Monangai within division, and someone I'll talk about later as well, is a 7th-round pick, and he had a good year for Chicago. So I do think addressing that at some point is definitely fair. I think they expected more out of Aaron Jones, obviously, with his veteran nature and him being a captain on the team, but also Jordan Mason was a pretty big free agent signing for them, given what he did last year with San Francisco, and he wasn't a 1,000-yard rusher. I think they kind of expected him to be that paired along with Aaron Jones. A lot of fantasy nerds especially expected Jordan Mason to have a better year than the year he had. So I'm fine with corner in that slot at 18. I think it would be a good value. It's not too high, it's not too low. And although you should be able to get, at worst, I think, your second favorite guy. I'd be kind of surprised if all three, if not just two of those guys are gone before then.
If all three are gone, I agree. I'd be pretty shocked, and at that point you just pivot because I don't think it's a dire enough need for them. Unless maybe they just love like a Brandon Cisse from South Carolina or someone like that. But there's no point to
It
try
also
and reach
means
or
someone
anything
had
like that.
fallen at that point.
That as well. So that's a good point. Moving on, free agency cap situation, not good. They're $40 million over the cap, not at all where you want to be. And you can toss some names out there potentially, but like looking at potential cut targets, most of the highest paid guys, it's like, well, I don't really want to cut that guy. Maybe you restructure to save some money, kick the can down the road. But I'm also not sure if they're going to want to do that because currently they're sitting pretty. They have they're $40 million under the cap or $50 million under the cap in 2027. So it's like maybe you just don't make any big moves this season, and this is already looking ahead, and save that cap space going into next offseason, and that's when you really try and make splashy moves, get good players. You can get good players for cheap, like get stars, get studs, and this year you just focus on maybe some depth signings, moving around a little bit of money, but nothing too crazy. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I don't know NFL well enough to know if that's like a legit team building strategy of like, oh, we're gonna wait because we're next year, like they do that a lot in the NBA, for example, of like next year's our year, or if in the NFL it's kind of like now we're just gonna keep going for it while we're in this spot.
I think if the Vikings were to do that, it's like a full submission. Like
Sure.
it's just we are admitting that we made the wrong move with Sam Darnold, made the wrong move with drafting J.J. McCarthy so high, and now we are just going to go into a rebuild. And I don't think, Justin Jefferson
They're not ready to do that.
deserves that. I
Yeah.
don't think that fan base thinks they're in that spot. I think a lot of people will spin it that Minnesota fans have every right to spin it that we were 9-8 and we were flipping terrible at quarterback all year outside of 2 J.J. McCarthy games and 2 Carson Wentz games. We had 4 good quarterback games this year, and we were 9-8.
Yeah, and some of those good quarterback games were just like decent.
Yeah.
Which, considering what came before them, or they were sandwiched between horrible games, it did make them look great. But it's not like those 4 games were Josh Allen level or anything like that. So I think that's fair. Does that make you think then that they will look to bring in a quarterback, at least to compete with JJ, or because I feel like in my eyes, I don't see a way where they don't give JJ another year, or
Absolutely.
at least going into the preseason or off season, look to give him another year. Maybe it's a situation the guy they bring in just like looks so good that they end up giving him the starting job. But it's not like we're fixing to see what we're seeing with the Colts today, where it's like it looks like Anthony Richardson's going to be cut or traded because like they're just ready to move on. So do you think they'll bring in somebody else?
I'll be shocked if they don't.
Yeah.
Because Kevin O'Connell has done so well with many backup quarterbacks. You think of like the astronaut Joshua Dobbs when he had that little 2 or 3 week run with Minnesota, where he comes in and leads a comeback against Atlanta. That one went well. Carson Wentz was putting his body through hell for them this year, and he played fine in his 5 games. Obviously, Sam Darnold was going to be, it felt like, the backup to J.J. McCarthy, and then he turned into a 4,000-plus yard passer. So I would be shocked if they didn't bring in a guy. Also, given J.J.'s injury history already, he's also not done a great job of protecting himself through games. I mean, if your young quarterback is going to miss 7 games, which he missed 7 games this year, that's almost half of the games in a season. I think you need to find some kind of piece there. So I would be shocked if they didn't bring in another quarterback, especially with the way Max Brosmer played. Carson Wentz is a free agent, so it's not like he's staying in-house. I do think they bring in somebody.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins would be kind of a fun one.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's necessarily something he wants, but I know he loved his time in Minnesota, so maybe that's a way you could spin it to him that, hey, you're probably going to start half the games for us, maybe.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. But if not, you're going to get to mentor J.J. McCarthy and get to move back to Minnesota, a place that
Sure.
you love.
Yeah, I should clarify a little bit. Obviously, they're going to add a quarterback. Like, someone has to be the backup. I more just mean someone where the fans are actually maybe like a little excited, like, oh, okay, and not someone where you sign and it's like, oh, if that's our backup, like, we better pray our starter never gets hurt because this season's just fully over.
Kirk Cousins might be that option then.
Yeah.
Of the guys that are available, I know like it's been like it was teased at least for a couple years of Aaron Rodgers coming to Minnesota. I think that ship has kind of sailed.
Agreed.
And it seems like he's a Steeler or he's retired. So Kirk would be that kind of guy. Because of their cap space, I don't think they can convince a Malik Willis or someone else to come to Minnesota.
Especially like a Malik Willis is definitely going to get an opportunity to start somewhere. Other like Marcus Mariota is a free agent. He had a pretty solid season with Washington. I don't know what he's looking for on the market, but Kirk Cousins would be very fun for sure. And so just wrapping it up then, 2026 goal. And I have kind of two-parter, figure out 9, like we just talked about, and we've talked about a ton during this primer because it's just easily the most important thing for this team is can JJ give you anything where to show you that he's the guy moving forward? Because personally, I mean, and this isn't like a hot take or anything, if he has a season he just had again, they're moving on. And even if he's just slightly better, like you probably are still moving on. But at least that's clarity, and they can at least, okay, now this is a sunk cost. We made a mistake, but like now it's time to move on. Or can he actually grow a lot, play a lot better, perform statistically a lot better? They make the playoffs. Maybe they go on a little run. That defense should still be really good. And then in the future you go into 2020, the 2027 season, and you're like, okay, this is our guy. Like, we're ready to roll. He's still not making a ton of money. Let's go try and win. So that's the biggest thing for me. But then it's also with the way the defense is structured and some of the offensive weapons you have, you got to get back into the playoffs at the same time. You won 13 games the year before, and then you dropped to 9. Shout out 9. I think they're ready to be back in the playoffs. I don't think they'll really. JJ would get scapegoated if they don't make the playoffs, but I think other heads would roll in that building if they don't make the playoffs again as well.
Yeah, and for them to keep their defensive coordinator Brian Flores as well, and to be able to have him another year with that defense, I think they kind of. A lot of the NFL views Kevin O'Connell as a winner. That's pretty much all he's done is win, except when he's gotten to the postseason. He hasn't got over that hump yet. So I do think realistic goal is fair in figuring out 9. And I do think that they feel like they should be in-house. They feel like they should be in the postseason next year. Will they be there? I don't know. NFC North is going to play a brutal schedule every year because they have to play themselves 6 times, which is the inverse of 9. Shout out 9. But they also are going to have a tough schedule on top of that. They finished in 3rd, and it was kind of, maybe it's a bad year to finish in 3rd because they're going to play the Commanders, who we expect to rebound next year.
Please.
Indianapolis, who was the hottest team in the NFL until the Sauce Gardner trade, and then San Francisco and the 49ers. They also play the AFC East and the NFC South next year, so there's some potential wins in there. Like, I'd assume you beat the Jets and the Dolphins next year, and maybe pick your 2 or 3 in the NFC South. But outside of that, it feels like they got an uphill climb because Chicago was amazing this year. Green Bay seems to be relatively consistent. Detroit, had a tough year, but they had one of the best offenses in the league, and that doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon. So it'll be an uphill climb. They may end up being forced into that rebuild. Like, I do think they'll be a trendy pick to have a really poor season next year.
Yeah,
I don't think they'll be on JP's 0-17 watch.
Yeah.
But they could be close. They could be like a 5-win team next year, especially if JJ is going to continue to play the way that he played this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Cool. We can move on. You pick one of your teams.
Okay,
we'll do one of yours
then.
next.
Let's move on to Chicago. and the Chicago Bears, who this year had an amazing season, all things considered, going from a 4-win team to overtime on the doorstep of playing in the NFC Championship game. This year, I thought the MVP was, without a doubt, Caleb Williams. This year, he had 3,942 passing yards, just 58 away from being Chicago's first 4,000-yard passer in a regular season in NFL, the history of their franchise. He also had 400 rushing yards on the ground. He had 3 rushing touchdowns to pair with that. He also had a receiving touchdown on a trick play this year. And then he was 27 touchdowns, 7 picks in the regular season as a quarterback throwing the football. He led 6 fourth-quarter comebacks and 6 game-winning drives with that. And then in the postseason, he had 609 passing yards. That's 300 per game. He struggled with interceptions and turnovers. He had 5 interceptions in the postseason, but he also had 4 touchdowns and, of course, 2 of the greatest throws, maybe not greatest, craziest throws in NFL playoff history that will be on every compilation of NFL greatest moments for the rest of time. They will just be there without question. 2 of the craziest fourth down conversions you've ever seen, both at home in Chicago. One to eventually end up beating the Green Bay Packers, and then the other to forced overtime in a play where he's forced 25 yards behind his line of scrimmage and just throws a Hail Mary essentially from the 50-yard line off his back foot for a touchdown. The biggest thing I thought he improved this year, which went completely under the radar, was sacks. Last year he led the league with the most sacks in the NFL, was 68. You know how many times he was sacked this year?
41.
He was sacked just 24 times this
Crazy.
year.
That's why Joe Tooney ever won the Protector of the Year award.
Yes, and then part of that was the moves that they made at offensive line with bringing in Ben Johnson and then bringing in guys like Joe Tooney. But also part of that was Caleb. He stopped doing some of the insane stuff of scrambling and trying to find the big play. He took a lot more of the easy ones. They ran the football a lot better with Kyle Monangai and DeAndre Swift. But 68 sacks to 24. That's a 44 sack difference.
That's ridiculous.
Is a ridiculous change, and it's kind of been the talking point for Chicago fans of, oh, this is a guy who's going to take his biggest weakness and just fix it every single offseason. The sky's the limit for the kid. So this offseason, it'll be completion percentage, where he was, I think it was 56.7% completion percentage. He was terrible this year. I coined it a Caleb Williams game in terms of where it was literally every game you'd see 20 completions to 40 attempts. The guy never had a normal NFL game this year. He would just have 50% completion percentage essentially every game. The talk is in Chicago is like, oh, he'll fix that, and that'll be the thing he improves this year. That remains to be seen. But I do think it is a valid potential take to have this offseason. Do you have a different MVP?
No, it's got to be him.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much of an argument either. For me, unsung hero, I went with 2 guys, one that is actually an unsung hero and the other is not so much. The not so much one is the new kid on the block, Kyle Monangai, 7th-round pick out of Rutgers. He had 947 yards from scrimmage this year as a 7th-round pick. He had he had one amazing game when DeAndre Swift was hurt, where he ran for over 140 rushing yards. He was very, very good this year, being a spellback for DeAndre Swift, who DeAndre had an amazing year himself as an 1,000-yard rusher for Chicago. The actual unsung hero, though, the one that you would not know the name of, have you ever heard of Nashawn Wright?
I don't believe so, no.
Yeah, Bears dealt with defensive back injury issues throughout the year. The names you do know, Jalen Johnson, who's been one of the best corners in the league, and then Commanders legend, although he never played for the Washington Commanders, Tyreek Stevenson, infamous or famed, if you're a Commanders fan, for talking crap to the fans before allowing the Hail Mary touchdown 2 years ago in that Commanders-Bears game. Both of them missed a lot of games this year, and so Chicago is not deep at corner. Nashawn Wright stepped in. He had 5 interceptions, including a pick 6. He had 2 forced fumbles and 3 fumble recoveries, and he made a Pro Bowl, sorry, not as like a return guy, as a true corner, and he was cornerback 3 coming into the season. He is a free agent, so he's going to be a priority potentially to re-sign this year. But for me, that was my unsung hero. Did you have a different unsung hero?
Both those are fine with me. I love Kyle Monangai back from the video game, Cultural 25.
Yeah.
And then I like the right shout out. So
Yeah, I think if there was any other unsung hero, it would be internally and their draft process. They nailed the draft this year with guys like Colston Loveland, who was a slow burner, eventually turned on, and was probably one of the best tight ends in the league the last 6 weeks, including the postseason. Luther Burden, also a slow burner. And then Kyle Monangai. All 3 of those guys were really, really good and looked to be offensive pieces for them. So if there is another unsung hero, would be just the Bears staff and draft prep. They really killed it this year.
Sure.
For this offseason, as they move on and try to build on what was an overachieving year, the Bears lost Eric Bieniemy, who was their running back coach. Bieniemy returns to the Kansas City Chiefs. They also lost Declan Doyle, who was their offensive coordinator. Now, Ben Johnson calls plays for Chicago, so it's not like they're losing the guy that calls plays. Declan Doyle was just a guy that was in meetings for prepping for the team and was one of the lead voices. That's what offensive coordinators do when the head coach calls plays. He joins the Ravens to become their offensive coordinator and join Jesse Minter's staff, and he's expected to call plays for them. So he'll be calling Lamar Jackson's plays this year, coming from Chicago with Ben Johnson. They promoted their passing game coordinator, Press Taylor, to offensive coordinator. And those are really the 2 big changes in-house. For the draft, the Bears had the 25th pick in the draft. They went heavy, and I mean heavy, offensively. Last year, of course, the three gamers, that's a great descriptor for all 3 of them in Colston Love and Luther Burden and Kyle Monangai. But they also drafted Ozzie Trapilo, who started a lot of games for them at on the offensive line in the second round as well. I think this year, it's very obvious. They need to go heavy defense, flip that on its head, go offense last year and defense this year. They're going to need edge rusher. They need to pair someone with Montez Sweat, who had 10 sacks this year. They're also going to need a safety to replace a back end that is like nearly guaranteed to be losing at least 50% of it, if not both, of their safeties this offseason. And then my last need, what I think would be personally interior linebacker. This is a team that's in win now mode. So edge rusher is, if Akeem Mesidor fell that far for whatever reason, which he gets mentioned in every team's draft, it feels like if he fell that far, I think they would jump on him. Otherwise, I do think they should just go best defender available, because I do think there's going to be a lot of options for them there. You're going to talk about guys like T.J. Parker, C.J. Allen out of Georgia. I could see them picking Anthony Hill that high. If they're that high on Anthony Hill, horns down, of course, because I don't expect him to be there in the second round. They don't pick until the 7th to last pick of the second round. Yeah. 55, I think, is what it is. Or no, it'd be 57. So if they really loved Anthony Hill, they could go for him. A lot of the great edge rushers are going to be gone, and so maybe it's a guy who fell for a reason that occurred in the combine.
Character
interviews,
issues cropped up.
Character issues.
You may not want to take the guy with character issues after what happened last year.
That was James Pierce last year, who of course is dealing with what he's dealing with now. But he had a great season for the Atlanta Falcons. That'll be remembered forever. Sadly, if someone fell for one of those reasons of something popped up in the combine or popped up in interviews or something, then maybe that is the move there. Any disagreements there? I do think there's a case for every damn team in the NFL because it's so fun and drafting a wide receiver.
Yeah.
And if like a first-round guy fell that far,
Sure. I agree with just kind of best available defensively, and then that immediately makes me really intrigued to see what their board looks like, which sadly I'll never get to see. But like when we get to that spot and they're about to pick, and we're going to be doing our live draft show coverage, and we're trying to think, who they're going to take, who they're going to take. Maybe someone does fall in their lap and it's really obvious, or maybe it is just kind of the cluster you just talked about, and it's like, okay, are they, who's their guy out of this group? But it makes perfect sense. You hit the home run last year with legitimately you got top 2 tight end in the draft.
Yeah.
What's looking like a top 3, top 5 running back. It was a really good running back class, so time will tell. In the 7th round. And then you got one of the best wide receivers in the draft as well. So you're almost kind of set in a lot of ways there. So pivot to the defense, beef it up. Completely agree.
For cap space contract decisions, the Bears are -$5 million in the cap space department. They do have a ton of restructuring possibilities. They could free up as much as $73 million in cap space. That's have $73 million, meaning they could free up $78 million. And they have a lot of high-end free agents, so they're going to have to make a ton of decisions, not only with the guys they have already under contract, so restructuring, but also some of the free agents they're losing. And Kevin Byard, the 33-year-old former Titan, is coming off a season where he made the Pro Bowl. He had 7 picks, and he played 99.8% of their defensive snaps, but he's 33. And so maybe you could move on from him. He was just a Pro Bowler. With him being 33, that kind of cheapens him and keeps him on a 1-year, maybe 2-year deal. Jaquan Brisker is the other safety who is also a free agent. He played a fine season statistically. He was more of a guy that popped and a leader as a part of that defense. He did not have an elite year statistically. Won't pop off the page if you're box score watching, but he played 99.9% of the snaps for Chicago. So these two safeties played essentially the entire defensive season for Chicago. They're both free agents. Jaquan Brisker's 27. He's got a big market for teams that are going to want him, and he's going to demand probably $20 million, give or take, if not more. Something that's kind of been teased by Bears media and Bears fans, specifically, though, Bears writers, which this and then some of the stuff with Green Bay shocked me that this was even like being talked about, because I follow a bunch of the New Orleans beat writers and whatnot, of course, as a New Orleans Saints fan, but they don't talk like the way that these two franchises have at least talked about their offseason going forward. And that's the Bears are testing a potential. They think they should test a DJ Moore trade. DJ Moore signed for the next 4 years. So, like, it's him trading him is not a rental deal. It's not a 1 year he'll become a free agent. No, he's under, he's under contract for 4 years. He's getting paid $29 million next year. That's the 13th highest paid receiver in the league. This year he had just 682 receiving yards, which was the 40th best in the league. He had a really up and down year. I mean, DJ Moore fantasy owners would know that. He'd be probably like Kenneth Walker 2.0, not in terms of he had plays that were stolen from him, but it was why'd you pop when it felt like it didn't matter towards the end of the season when I drafted you so high. I wonder how that would work out. I mean, they obviously have the weapons maybe in-house already with Luther Burton and Rome Odunze and what's his name? Ja'Day Walker.
Yeah,
of Texas
all day
A&M,
Ja'Day.
who had a fine year, has some very bright moments for Chicago. But what is the market for DJ Moore and $29 million a year, which a lot of that for this year, if you don't know, NFL contracts, when you trade NFL contracts, the team that is trading their player to another team has to pay all of the signing bonus that they give to a player.
Yeah.
So that makes like contracts like Jordan Love essentially like untradeable, because over 75% of his contract is fully guaranteed signing bonus money that you're going to have to pay. DJ Moore is not necessarily that. He could free up nearly $20 million in cap space if they were to trade him just this year. So they're not going to eat a ton of signing bonus. They will have to eat signing bonus over a few years. But I don't know what the market's going to be there for DJ Moore. This is a guy that they already traded for in a trade that eventually landed them Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
But with the way he had the season he had, I don't hate it necessarily. I was just kind of surprised to see it. It wasn't something I necessarily considered.
It's so interesting because I get the thought behind trading him, but every other team also knows why you're trying to trade him.
Yeah.
And that's because it doesn't really seem like he's going to be worth the contract. So then it's like you're not really probably getting much back for him. You're really just trading him to free up that cap space, like you said.
In terms of free agency and actually signing players, I do think with the cap limbo that they can do, which I expect them to do a fair amount of it, not to the level that the New Orleans Saints do. And it won't be, they don't have to do it to the level that teams like Kansas City or Minnesota will have to do, where they're 30+ million over the cap. They're just $5 million over. So I do think they will make some of those moves to free up some cap. And I do think they should lean on themselves and bring back the guys that were part of a very productive season for them in Kevin Byard, in the unsung hero Nashawn Wright, who was a Pro Bowler. I do think Devin Duvernay had a very good year for them as a returner. He did not end up returning a touchdown this year, but he was productive for them. He sparked a few of their wins, one of them most notably a win at Minnesota, where he returns a huge kick return with less than a minute remaining in that game, and it leads to a field goal for Chicago. I think bringing someone like him back makes a ton of sense. I also think some kind of veteran receiver on a cheap deal, if you are to trade DJ Moore, makes a ton of sense. And I'm thinking guys like pipe dreams, really, Keenan Allen or Mike Evans. As Keenan Allen has already played in Chicago. Mike Evans obviously has been a Buck his entire career. When you think of Rome Odunze and Luther Burden, those are more playmakers. Luther Burden, of course, is speed threat over the top. But you have a guy like Rome Odunze who's a playmaker. You add Mike Evans, he can be a physical threat for you down in the end zone, which can pair with Cole Kmet and Colson Loveland as those physical threats. He also plays well in once you get to cold weather, because once you get to cold weather, speed doesn't necessarily take over as much.
Sure.
It becomes a lot more physicality. And, Mike, of course, has played in Tampa Bay for many, many years, so he wouldn't be used to Chicago cold, but his body's ready for that kind of environment and those kinds of games. But those are pipe dreams, and those are really only if they were to trade DJ Moore that those make sense. There are 3 free agents, and I'm curious to know if you know the connection for them. Tim Patrick, Josh Reynolds, and Khalif Raymond, all free agent wide receivers. Why do you think I bring up those 3 names?
Well, Tim Patrick and Josh Reynolds, I know for sure both played for the Lions at one point. I don't even remember the third guy you said.
Khalif Raymond.
Is he also a Lion?
All 3 of them played for the Lions, and all 3 played with Ben Johnson.
Gig 'em for Josh Reynolds, by the way.
Absolutely. I do think as former Ben Johnson receivers, it makes a ton of sense to potentially bring in those guys if they trade DJ Moore, but even if they don't, to kind of hit the ground running for them.
I mean, none of those guys are going to be all that expensive.
No, not at all. Tim Patrick probably had the best year of anyone playing with the Jaguars. But Josh Reynolds and Khalif Raymond are also both guys that played for Ben Johnson. I do think those are kind of maybe some potential wide receiver free agents for them if they're to attack offense in any way. But I do think the main part of free agency should be bringing back the guys that are free agents in Kevin Byard, Nashawn Wright, Devin Duvernay. Bringing those guys back and being able to build on that core, I think, is the key to free agency. Any names pop off the page for you?
No, I like bringing back the guys, personally.
Yeah. For early realistic goal next year, I do think it is to make the postseason and not to win the division, because the damn division is so damn difficult, redundant. with how electric Caleb and Chicago were last year, and obviously, we talked about it a ton, is they can't rely on fourth quarter comebacks as much. I don't think anyone expects them to do so. With how electric they were, how competitive their division will be, and how competitive they were in their own division, I do think they should strive, and the goal is postseason or bust. Not the lofty expectations that a lot of people are going to put on them because they were a drive away, a score away from being in the NFC Championship game, playing in overtime against the Rams. I do think it's to make the postseason. Because if you have a guy like Caleb and he's that damn good and he's that electric, to bring up a guy 2 years ago, Jaden Daniels, your guy.
Yep.
He didn't win the division. No, he went on the road. He beat Tampa Bay. He went on the road, and he beat the Detroit Lions, the number one overall seed. And sadly, they were not up to the task for the Philadelphia Eagles, but you give him a chance to go on some kind of run like that. And this same goes for Caleb, who his 2 games were at home, but it was an electric 2 games that they were right there for. Make the postseason, I think, is the goal for next year. Has to be. I feel like it's postseason or bust. You can't let this become, one, something that drastically turns around, speaking of the Commanders.
Sadly, yes.
2, something that is like, oh, man, we just missed it. We just missed it. Think of Joe Burrow and the Bengals. They made the Super Bowl, of course, in year 2 with Joe Burrow, but he hasn't been back to the postseason since he lost in the AFC Championship game to Mahomes. That can't happen with Chicago, not with the way the NFC is built, at least. So I think you got to prioritize making the postseason at all costs to give Caleb another chance to prove if he really is Iceman, as he has been coined this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a safe expectation or goal, but I do like it for all the reasons you said, especially the keeping of momentum within the clubhouse and within the organization. Don't pull Commanders where, a year ago today I was much more excited about the direction, and now I'm scared and I don't know what's going to happen next, or even talking about the Bengals. So yeah, just make the playoffs, keep the momentum going. Caleb's still really young. A lot of those offensive weapons and pieces are still really young. Ben Johnson's still really young. Just keep the momentum going.
Well said. Right, we can go to you.
Yep, on to the Lions.
Let us go to Detroit, formerly Ben Johnson's home.
Yep. The Detroit Lions had a very disappointing 2025 season. High expectations. I mean, they just were the 1 seed the year before. Now, that didn't end very well for them. Shout out my guy, Jaden Daniels. And then, they were kind of hoping for similar things last year, and they don't even end up making the playoffs. Defense took a step back. The offense was very good, but still had its kind of moments of frustration and inconsistency. And those moments led to them firing Jim Morton, who they described him as an old fart, right? They decided not to keep the old fart around, and they replaced him with Drew Petzing. He's the new OC, so kind of throwing darts at the dartboard, bringing in another guy, seeing if he can be the heir apparent to Ben Johnson, get their offense fully back on track. Because, once again, it was not a bad unit last year. They scored a ton of points. I'm going to say right now, I mean, my 2025 MVP for this team was Jahmyr Gibbs. He had over 1,800 all-purpose yards, over 20 TDs scored. He was phenomenal. But a lot of times it just honestly kind of felt with that team that when their offense needed to make a play the most, it wasn't made. Maybe it was a bad play call in a lot of spots. They got too cute. I know you were really frustrated with that a ton last year,
yeah.
JP. And so they're trying to right that ship. They're trying to become feared again in that department and become killers. And they think a new OC is part of that. Personally, I think it's a little hard to be a killer with Jared Goff as your quarterback. But I digress. That's really their only big coaching change. Dan Campbell is still there. Gig'em. The new defensive coordinator, who I'm blanking on his name, Stevenson?
I don't know his name, to be
look it
honest.
up,
I know what he looks like. He got a big play sheet.
He has a huge play sheet. He has the dreads. I saw the name. I was like, I'm not going to write that down because I'll remember it, and I should have wrote it down. Kelvin Shepard. So not Stevenson, Shepard. It did start with an S, though. Kelvin Shepard was the defensive coordinator. I like him a lot. I think it made perfect sense to bring him back. But yeah, that's where they're at from a coaching standpoint. Are you fine with those decisions?
Yeah, I do think it is priority number one to get back to being the physical Detroit Lions that Dan Campbell wanted to be. And I don't really feel like going down that rabbit hole again. But you said it well, and it really, really frustrated me with the way Detroit played this year, and how damn cute they got in critical moments where you are having, 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1s, 3rd and goals, and you're running your trick plays rather than just running the damn ball. Hand it off to Jahmyr Gibbs. You have the best running back in the league, arguably. Give him the ball and let him go do something. Or David Montgomery. Not this, let's throw a pass to Jared Goff stuff. So I hope that they get back to that kind of brand of football because they can be so explosive in the passing game, and that's awesome. But if they are so physically dominant in 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, then they become unstoppable because it feels like, Philly's offense felt like last year when they went on their Super Bowl run where they were so explosive with Saquon Barkley in the run game and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith over the top. Jalen Hurts would pop a 40-yard run here and there. And then you would, in the back of your mind, if 1st and 10 and 2nd down and whatever end up in 3rd and 2, we're toast because they'll just push us twice and it's an automatic first down. They don't care. If the Lions can get to that, it makes them so dangerous because now it's, instead of it being 1st and 10, it's 1st and 8. And we just got to get to 3rd and 2. If we can get to 3rd and 2, we've picked up a first down because we can just hand it off to Jahmyr Gibbs or David Montgomery. I hope that they get back to that kind of football because it makes them so dangerous. Because they can be so explosive, but then they can hit you for 3 yards when they only need to.
Yep. And how do they get back to that? They address some of the offensive line issues.
Sure.
Obviously, hopefully the new OC and just kind of he really takes that job by the reins and removes some uncertainty that happens in play calling in those moments. He's confident enough in himself, and Dan Campbell's confident enough in him that they, they stay the course in those moments. But leading to the draft, that's probably their best chance to address at least some of the offensive line. They actually have a bit of cap space. We'll get into that in a minute, which personally surprised me a little bit. They're drafting 17th overall. It's a decent spot to potentially take tackle, which is one of their biggest needs. You have Sewell on one side. You maybe fix the other side. Names like Spencer Fano, Caden Proctor. I personally love Caden Proctor here, which there's rumblings about, Caden Proctor was going to rocket up draft boards in the coming months. So there's a high chance if that is true, Caden Proctor will not be here at 17. But he came along a lot as a tackle last season, and then even if he doesn't work out at tackle, he's huge. He's just a freak. You can push him into guard, and I think he'd thrive at guard if tackle doesn't work. But something like that, and then if you're going to not go tackle, maybe you want to address some of the defensive issues. Another edge rusher would be nice. Keldrick Falk could be someone like that in this area. T.J. Parker, who you mentioned for the Vikings. A lot of similar names coming. They literally draft a... No, I did the Vikings. They draft a pick apart, excuse me.
Yeah.
And then even cornerback. Their cornerback room was not great last year. Got picked on a lot. Now, they had a lot of injuries as well that didn't help. It was a very thin room. But they could be someone that could go Avion Terrell or maybe Jermod McCoy, somebody like that if they wanted to go that route. Personally, I'd love for them to take a tackle, take an offensive lineman for all the reasons you just talked about of that's kind of their identity. And so they need to get back to that. But your thoughts on that pick?
Yeah, something to think about for them is, Jared Goff is older, but I don't think with the way that he plays quarterback, the dude could still play for 5 more years. And so
100%.
You need to not necessarily just prioritize this short 1-2 year window, whatever it may be, but also prioritize the next 3, 4, 5 years from now. So I do think, when you have this opportunity, we missed the postseason, we failed. Now we're picking in the teens when we are used to picking in the 20s. Let's go and get a blue chip kind of player, someone who's going to be a guy for the next 3 or 4 years, just like how we built this damn thing with guys like Jahmyr Gibbs and Aiden Hutchinson and Jack Campbell and whatnot. Penei Sewell, one of those. So I do think offensive tackle makes a ton of sense. It's something that the Dallas Cowboys did so well for years and years and they continue to do it, prioritized their offensive line, and it has never really been an issue for them. And so now guys like Tony Romo and Dak Prescott are allowed to flourish because they have the protection up front because it's prioritized.
Sure.
With guys like Zach Martin and Tyron Smith and Zach Frederick, which elite name. And now they've done that again with Tyler Booker this past year. So I would make a ton of sense for tackle. It would feel like a boring pick for what is a fun team in the NFL.
Sure.
I'll be shocked if Spencer Fano is that high.
Yeah, that's fair.
But Caden Proctor, Caleb Lomu, the other Utah tackle would make a ton of sense. The talk right now with Spencer Fano is that like he's going to be a top 10 pick.
Crazy. Okay.
It's very quickly shifted. Some people have mocked him at 3.
I was say
to the Cardinals.
A couple of the tackles are gonna have to go in the top 10. Like a couple of them are gonna have to rise. So I guess he's been coined as the one. But it's honestly trying to take a tackle in the teens a lot of times is scary. But I actually like it in this draft because there's a lot of uncertainty about who the best is and which ones are really elite. So now it really doesn't feel like you have to be worried about reaching for a guy when you're taking whoever falls to you at 17. You kind of feel like it's honestly getting a bit of a value pick.
There's a lot more safety in it too.
Sure.
Like what quickly became a narrative with the last 3 games for the New England Patriots was, did they reach at Will Campbell at number? Wasn't it number 3 overall?
Yes. Yeah.
So was that a reach? Should they have done something else? Did they pick the wrong tackle? Is being talked about, which New Orleans Saints fans love that with Kelvin Banks.
Yeah.
I hated the pick at the time, of course, but and no fan base loves an offensive tackle first pick.
You hate it for other reasons. You didn't necessarily hate it because you hated Kelvin Banks.
Absolutely.
You wanted somebody else.
But a teen pick, I do think it's a little bit safer because there are, I do think, some risk with some of those tackle guys drafting them so damn high. Like Francis Mauigoa, the risk is, he feels more like a guard than he feels like a tackle. And I haven't dived deep enough into Spencer Fano to know the risk off the top of his head. But I think there is a little bit more safety there at 17.
You do the spin zone of, we knew he was a bit of a project when we drafted him.
Yeah.
So, this is fine. He's growing. And whereas, exactly, you take some guy 3rd overall, and it's like, how is he not already immediately good?
Agreed.
Looking at cap situation, I mentioned it's not as bad as I expected it to be. I expected them to be one of the teams that were in cap space hell, as they call it. But they're really just $9 million over the cap, with wiggle room and ways to move around contracts, restructure contracts, cut a couple guys if they want to get under the cap, free up a little bit of money. So maybe they even want to address some offensive line in free agency. If not, I think a lot of the free agency money is going to go towards the defense. Bring back a couple guys potentially. They don't necessarily have the biggest crop of guys leaving in terms of huge names. I mean, there's some storied Detroit Lions from this run. Like Alex Anzalone is a free agent.
Yeah.
But I mean, his market value is only here at $7 million. So maybe they do bring him back. Though based on what he posted on Twitter yesterday, I don't think they're bringing him back
either.
He's definitely leaving. He voices displeasure, basically being kind of straight up saying they're not trying to bring me back. They're trying to bring back these other guys. So I think you can kiss him goodbye. So maybe they try and replace him with another linebacker in free agency or in the draft. But yeah, they're not in a spot where they're for example, you mentioned some of the Bears players that are leaving. It's oh, wow, those were stalwarts of that team. Huge difference makers. They don't really necessarily have those pieces to have to try and retain. So maybe they can go spend it elsewhere and actually bring in legit additions, not just retaining guys.
Yeah, the highest snap percentage guy was Alex Anzalone at 90. Outside of that, the next closest is it's 75%, Amik Robinson. But outside of that, everyone else is 50% or lower. They do have, you mentioned a few of the great Lions legends is how they were viewed with the way that this franchise has turned it around in Anzalone. But you also have guys like Dan Skipper, who's going to be free
Yeah.
agent. Jake Bates is a free agent. He's still very young, and I do think I would be kind of shocked if they didn't bring him back because he kicks pretty damn well. The
True.
former UFL kicker out of Arkansas, former Michigan Panther. If you're a Michigan Panther fan out there, let us know in the chat. But there's not a lot of high end guys for them, and I do agree with it shocks me that they're not in cap hell because Jared Goff is on the cap next year for I think it's $70 million, which is a lot of bans for Jared Goff.
It's too much bands for Jared Goff. I'm going to go and say
I'm pretty sure isn't it like 55 base salary too? It's
Yep.
not even a ton of signing bonus.
55 base salary.
Which that will help them. Like if they want to restructure, they can turn a ton of that into signing bonus. So they could free up cap space if they wanted to. But you've kind of put all your money down. You've given the bread out to guys like Jared Goff and Aiden Hutchinson and Penei Sewell and Ahmad St. Brown. So they should prioritize not very many, I think, of their free agents that they have going out. I do think you try to replenish through the draft and get those cheap contracts that you have guaranteed for 4 years rather than going and spending more money because you're going to have to spend money here in a second anyway on a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs.
Correct, 100%. They can't get too greedy because it'll very much catch up. This is honestly, we do this video, for example, say in 2 years, we will be looking and going, oh, they're $50 million over the cap. They'll be in that spot all of a sudden. So last thing then, 2026 goal, you got to make the playoffs. You have to. And return to being feared is kind of the non just like game or objective goal, and it's 2024. It was scary to play the Lions. You knew they were going to run it up on you, and they did a lot of that this past year. But you also were scared to play that defense. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson got off to a great start. They could make plays in the secondary, and in this past year, it kind of was like, okay, it very well is going to be a shootout, but I kind of like my odds in the shootout. That's how it felt, every time we did a Lions preview. So return to being feared. Return to being in a spot where teams don't want to go play you, where they don't go, oh, nice, we get to go play like in the Dome in Detroit. That sounds like a pretty good time. I'm going to put up some good stats. Fix that. Make the playoffs again. Try and go on a run. I've dogged on them all preview, so I'm going to do it again. I'm just not the biggest Jared Goff guy, so I'm not sure a run's really going to happen, but make the playoffs again.
I think with the weapons, it's fully there.
Yes.
I kind of disagree with you there. I do think it's...
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
It's an option... I mean, it's an option for 29 teams in the NFL to win the Super Bowl. The 3 not being the Cleveland Browns, New York Jets, and Atlanta Falcons.
Okay. The Falcons, tough for the Falcons, man.
Carolina, you got a chance.
You think the Cardinals?
Next year, okay, yeah, let's add them to the list.
Yeah, okay.
28th. Let's not continue on that, though. But you look at, everyone's just going to compare it to the team that just won the championship, because why wouldn't you? But even you could go 2 years ago to that champion as well. Was quarterback play through the roof for either of those guys? No. Sam Darnold was great in the playoffs. Jalen Hurts was great in the playoffs. Now, Jared Goff hasn't been great in the playoffs yet, but he could be. Those quarterbacks, don't have numbers that really compare to Jared Goff's numbers in the regular season the last 4 years with Detroit. So I do think it's completely possible.
But next year, I don't think the defense is going to be like great. Like both those quarterbacks.
They need better defense.
Yes.
The big difference between the two teams that I just mentioned, the Eagles and Seahawks, is they had elite defenses to pair with that quarterback.
Because you are right. Realistically, even average quarterback play in the playoffs with a great defense, you can make your run. And Jared Goff is more than capable of that. But unless they just kill this draft, I don't see the defense reaching that point.
Yeah, injuries has been an issue for 2 years now. But they really, 2 years ago, they were better defensively than they were last year, which was kind of surprising because they had less injuries this past year, less catastrophic injuries, I should say, this past year than they had 2 years ago. So They need to return to some kind of that. It is kind of surprising that for everything that Dan Campbell is built on, that they haven't been that great defensively in his 4 years. In his 5 years as head coach, they've had these are the points per game. Defense ranks is 22nd last year, 7th 2 years ago, then 23rd, 28th, and 31. So they've been a bottom 10 defense from a points per game perspective 4 out of the 5 seasons with Dan Campbell. When they were top 10, they were 7th. They were 15-2, and they were the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
They had the best record in the NFL that year. Or it might have been tied with Kansas City, I'm pretty sure, at 15-2 as well. So they should be in a great spot if they can return to any kind of form there defensively.
And maybe that year is like because of how good they were. Like we're trying to hold on to that, and that realistically is the outlier for Dan Campbell teams.
Maybe.
That kind of defense. But there's no harm in trying to get back to that because it's a pretty great spot to be. Last thing, because I forgot to shout him out earlier, is my unsung hero,
Sure.
Unsung MVP for last year. Thomas Harper, safety.
I don't know that name, so that's a great pull.
Undrafted in the 2024 draft out of Notre Dame. Had 7 pass deflections, 1 interception this past year, and PFF had him graded out higher than like Brian Branch, for example, kind of the benchmark for that team in terms of defensive back play. I'd never heard of him either, I'm not going to lie. But just kind of like looking through, I was like, oh, he looks like someone that for a team that suffered a lot of injuries stepped in and played really, really well. So
I would have this is a joke, but Khalif Raymond, he led the league in punt returns this year.
Shout out Khalif.
That's something I love.
He just was returning everything.
Yeah, he had 32 punt returns this year.
No fair catches.
That is something I love about Pro Football References. They will bold a stat when a player leads that stat that in the league that year.
Yeah, and it may just like not matter.
That's the only bold for the Detroit Lions this past year.
That's amazing.
Is Khalif Raymond? He led the league in punts. That was what they were best at in Detroit. So
hey, shout out Khalif then.
Free agent. Maybe they should prioritize re-signing him.
Sounds like they should. I mean, he led the league, right?
Yeah.
You don't for cheap too. I think his market value is like $3 million. So
I wouldn't expect a big contract for Mr. Khalif Raymond, even with him leading the league in punts returned last year. He averaged 7.5 yards per punt return. He did have a punt return touchdown. But moving on to the final team for today's NFC North Primers.
The team you're repping.
The team I am repping. The Green Bay Packers, who last year had I would say another disappointing finish to the year. They start 9-3-1, shout out 9, and then lose their final 5 games of the year. They end up losing, of course, in the first round of the playoffs in devastating fashion to the Chicago Bears, where they allow a huge comeback in the second half. Their offense goes cold after Jordan Love started the game with 4 passing touchdowns. If the playoffs had not been expanded 5 years ago, Matt LaFleur would not have reached the postseason without Aaron Rodgers so far.
So he's a 7. He's a expanded playoffs merchant.
Yes, they've been the 7 seed 3 years in a row, and they have won, of course, the one playoff game against the Dallas Cowboys, which, gosh, it hurts my soul even trying to remember that as a Dak Prescott guy.
Sure.
For them last year, the MVP was Micah Parsons, the man who they spent a ton of draft capital trading for and then signed to a massive extension as well. He was amazing for them last year. He had another great season, and he only played 13 games. Last year, he had 14.5 sacks, if I'm not mistaken. 12.5 sacks. He was an all-pro first-teamer, a Pro Bowler. He had 12 TFLs. He started slow to start the season because he didn't participate in a lot of OTAs with the contract negotiations with the Dallas Cowboys. And so his first game with them, he only played like third down snaps in the game. Only pass rush obvious scenarios. He has a sack in that game. He has the first sack of his career with the Green Bay Packers on Jared Goff in that game. He immediately kind of rejuvenated that fan base. I mean, that's one of the coolest moments of the season last year for me was when Micah enters the game for the first time for for the Green Bay Packers. Jeez. And the crowd is going absolutely electric. And he has a sack in that game, and they are electric again for him. And then, of course, him returning to Dallas just a few weeks later. He's my MVP. I think it's kind of undebatable. I think if you were going to pick another guy to be Tucker Kraft,
Sure.
the other guy that tore his ACL.
Tough when both your potential MVPs suffered season-ending injuries.
Yeah, Tucker Kraft had an amazing year for them before he tore his ACL.
Great Tucker Kraft value.
Yeah, he had 489 receiving yards. He had 6 touchdowns. This is just in 8 games, meaning he was on pace for an 1,000-yard receiving season and 12 receiving touchdowns as a tight end. He would have had 64 catches, meaning this guy was 15.3 yards per catch. This is a big play threat tight end. No checkdowns for Tucker Kraft. And just, of course, an amazing name, given that the Cheeseheads are there in Green Bay. He unfortunately tore his ACL, and so both of those guys are kind of in question of returning next year. But those were the MVPs for them this past year. And, of course, kind of not when you lose your MVP, it's not unsurprising when you kind of go on a downward spiral from there on. And, of course, they were 9-3-1 with Micah Parsons, 0-5 without him. And they were very good with Tucker Kraft offensively. And then post him, they were not. For unsung hero, there aren't a lot of easy picks, but I went with their punter. This is a non-joking bold stat on Pro Football Reference. He led the league in average yards per punt last year at 52.
Shout out him. What's his name?
Daniel Whelan, the 26-year-old, led the league in yards per punt at 51.7 for them last year. He had a long punt of 72, 18 punts inside the 20-yard line for an average of 36.7% for all you punter fanatics out there. Those are good numbers.
Yeah.
And you would agree, of course, if you're a punter fanatic. That would have been my unsung hero for them. I don't think there were a lot of very easy picks for them because they're a team that are so spread across the board. All their receivers had decent seasons, you could say. Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, each had 6 receiving touchdowns and each had roughly 650 receiving yards. Matthew Golden had a poor year. Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed had poor years compared to the last year. So, unless there's another name, we can move on to this offseason for Green Bay. And the Packers started the offseason by putting the Matt LaFleur talk of him being fired to bed almost immediately. They extended him to a nice, healthy contract. So he will be the Green Bay Packers coach for the foreseeable future. Their defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, took the Miami Dolphins head coaching job. He had been the DC for Green Bay the last 2 seasons and had a top 12 defense, both in points per game and yards per game, each of the last 2 seasons for Green Bay, which is kind of against the norm for Green Bay. They've really not had a lot of good defenses there in the past 20 years in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Hafley, of course, took the Miami Dolphins head coaching job. Former Cardinals head coach Jonathan Gannon took a bus from Arizona to Green Bay, and he will now be the defensive coordinator for Green Bay. He took a bus ride the entire way across, which is an inside joke, of course. Do you know this joke?
Mm-mm.
So Jonathan Gannon, one of his original talks with the Arizona Cardinals, the team meeting, it was on Hard Knocks. No, it wasn't on Hard Knocks, which makes it even worse. It was posted by the Arizona Cardinals social media.
Tough.
I beg you to go look it up.
I'm going to see if I can find it right now.
He infamously, in my opinion, starts his speech with, all right, how many guys, raise your hand, took the bus this morning to work? Asking NFL players, did they take the bus to work this morning? I don't think anyone raised their hand. They didn't pan to the crowd. And then he eventually goes on to say, we're going to have that kind of attitude. We're taking the bus to work in the morning, not literally, but figuratively, and we're gonna.
He was on that should run more blue collar mentality.
He continues on
BS.
to you feel that fire in your gut, you feel that burning. Hilarious, and posted by their own social media, which is just terrible. If you've never seen it, please go watch it because it is hilarious. It is a disaster class of a first, motivational speech for his team. Jack's listening to it right now. It's just absolutely hilarious. He's going to be the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers, and I hope at least Matt LaFleur doesn't let him give too many speeches for them this year because he did not have a good couple seasons with the Arizona Cardinals. They were a team that were 8-9 2 years ago, but they were terrible this year, and that franchise is down in the dumpster. So honestly, congrats, Jonathan, fellow Jonathan, for getting out of Arizona and joining the Green Bay Packers. You're going to love it here, we hope, as long as you continue to build on those great defenses they've had the last 2 years. They also made some really big changes in-house to position jobs. They changed 5 different position coaches. So they're really trying to get away from the team that made the playoffs as a 7 seed the last 3 years. They're really trying to turn that ship around and go to a new path for Green Bay. For the NFL draft, Green Bay has no first-round pick because of the Micah Parsons trade. Dallas has that pick at 20th overall. So they will not make their first pick until 32 picks later, naturally, because there are 32 teams in the NFL, at pick 52 in the second round. This is the second latest a team will make their first pick, just in front of Jacksonville, who's picking at 56. That's their first pick because of the Travis Hunter trade. Who is going to be available at 52? That is just pure guesswork.
The only people that could possibly tell us are maybe our wood shamans. We could maybe go ask them. But
sure.
No normal mortal man is knowing who's available there.
Yeah, it's complete guesswork at that point. So for needs, what they need to kind of address, and I do think they need to address these in the draft, is Green Bay needs to draft offensive tackle, which I'll get into why in a second. They're also going to need corner help. They are slated to lose 3 tackles that started games for them in free agency. That includes Rasheed Walker, who is their starting left tackle this year. And they also they don't necessarily need to replace left tackle. They expect to move Jordan Morgan, who was their first-round pick 2 years ago, over to left tackle and have him start at left tackle. Their corner group, this is a corner group that had Jair Alexander, one of the best corners in the league, when he was a Green Bay Packer. They're no longer of high regard. In fact, they've kind of been joked about. Green Bay has always had corners that they've had really, really good corners. You can think of Charles Woodson, you think of Jair Alexander, but they've also had corners that you make fun of because they get beat all the time. And that is because they don't prioritize corners whatsoever. And so it would be one of the shocks of the draft, and it's not very well known, for Green Bay to select a corner prior to the 7th round, because the last 4 years they have not selected a corner unless it was in the 7th round.
Cool. So
only one of those corners is on the roster.
The cornerback big board I just looked up, and I'm looking at the names that maybe will be available there. And I'm like, okay, some of these names are frisky, like Chris Johnson from San Diego State or Keontae Scott from Miami. I can just throw all that out the window.
More than likely.
Okay.
Unless they completely change the way that they think about it, which they should, because they need to draft a corner. That is the weakest part of their defense by far. Their safety group is probably the best in the league. Of course, they have Micah Parsons, and their linebacking group has been really good for them as well. Shout out Edgerrin Cooper, Gig'em. So they need to address that in some way, but it would be a shock because they haven't done that for 4 years in a row. That being said, they changed the narrative last year, drafting Matthew Golden, a first-round receiver, and so maybe it's in the cards this year.
Sure.
But they won't be drafted until 52, so it won't be one of those top guys, and it won't be some of it. It may not be a guy like Keontae Scott or D'Angelo Pons, the 2 guys that played the national championship, to fall that far either. For cap space and contract decisions, The Packers are negative $1 million in cap space. They have some notable free agents that are leaving. Malik Willis is due to get 3 years and $66 million from the Atlanta Falcons per Atlanta Falcons fans.
Yep. That's wishful thinking on their part.
Unbelievable. Wishful thinking how? Just to clarify.
That like they should do that or they're going to do that.
Not
that Malik Willis is going to get that kind of money from somebody. But it's just so funny that that's what Falcons fans think they're going to do, and that's what they think is going to save them.
Yeah, whoever Malik Willis ends up signing with, this will be the stat that I will read or one of us will read as we do their team preview next year, and that is this year Malik Willis was 30 for 35 for 422 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 picks, including 19 first downs on his 30 completions for the game and a half that he played for the Green Bay Packers. They're taking that bright moment. Of course, he had 2 wins last year, 2 years ago at this point, with the Green Bay Packers, and that is apparently turning into 3 years, $66 million. He's going to be gone. He's going to start somewhere. He's probably quarterback 2 in terms of the free agents available. Daniel Jones, probably quarterback 1, but it also looks like Daniel Jones is just going to re-sign with Indianapolis.
He would be stupid not to. They'd be stupid not to re-sign him. So.
Agreed. So Malik Willis is probably quarterback 1 of free agency, which is just awesome. How did we get this far? It is kind of shocking how bad the quarterback market just continues to be every single year.
Yeah,
not a lot of big names.
No one's going to let their quarterback get to free agency if they're worth any sort of like, if they're competent at all.
I'm struggling to remember the last guy that was a notable one that was a free agent. Tom Brady, maybe wasn't he a free agent at the very end? He wasn't traded to Tampa Bay.
Then, yeah, he must have just been a free agent, and he just hopped on over to Tampa Bay, hopped on down.
So I think that might be the most last notable name, and that guy's the GOAT. Malik Willis is not the GOAT, sadly. Other free agents, Romeo Doubs, sadly him and his Guardian cap are probably on their way out.
I would love to see him in that Commander's helmet up there next year. I won't lie.
Yeah, I think he's a very, very talented receiver. I've kind of always thought he was 1A, and if not, he's 1B to Christian Watson. Sure. Now I hope Matthew Golden gets to be 1A going forward. Horns down, of course, though, still. But Romeo Doubs is probably gone because they got Christian Watson. They drafted Matthew Golden. They still keep Jaden Reed if he's healthy next year. So Romeo Doubs is gone. The talk in-house is that state legend Elton Jenkins will be released. Elton Jenkins is, of course, famous, in my opinion, for breaking the big cowbell at one of our games 2 years ago, trying to hype up the team.
Hey, they needed all the hype they could get in those years, so I respect him for trying.
That cowbell went flying down onto the pavement. He was up in the top deck. Thankfully, it wasn't near the edge because that would have potentially hurt someone really badly. He was ringing that thing. They think they're going to release him. He started at center this year. He would free up $20 million in cap space. He's due for a really big number next year, but a lot of it's base salary, so that it's not necessarily something that they're going to have to pay a lot of signing bonus for. They also are. This is one of the things that I mentioned in the Bears preview. The writers want them to release Rashawn Gary, who had a great season for them paired alongside Micah Parsons, to free up cap space. To sign a guy of similar quality, I guess.
You're not getting anyone better. I understand Rashawn Gary for where they drafted him, their hopes for him.
Yeah.
Didn't fully pan out. He's a quality NFL edge rusher. You're just not going to find anyone better. That is crazy.
Shocked me.
Yeah.
And the dude, one of the writers for Green Bay's
maybe there's
behind
the scenes stuff we don't know if they're just more plugged in.
They were talking about the lack of effort that he would show in certain plays, and because he was kind of pushed to sometimes a second-tier role behind Micah Parsons, that's why he showed a lack of effort. But it just makes no sense to just release the guy when you're not going to get anything better. Might as well continue to play him, especially if Micah may not even start next year at the beginning of the season for them. They would need a guy like Rashawn Gary. More known, though, decision that they will have to make is Quay Walker, a defensive captain last year for them, who is a free agent. I do think he's like the biggest point of their offseason of decisions to make.
Sure.
Do you bring him back? I don't know what his market value on whatever site is.
It claims $8.2 million is what SpotTrack has.
My guess is I think he's going to get twice that, nearly $15 million. I think that's about where he's going to be. He's just 27. He's a very young. He's a younger.
Not even, he's under 26.
Oh, he's 26.
Yeah, 25.8 is his
Okay,
age.
sweet. So he'll turn 27 at the end of next year. I wonder if you bring him back for $15 million a year. Speaking of cap space, like I talked about earlier, it's -$1 million, so they can restructure and make up enough room for that pretty easily.
Yeah.
I do think it depends though on what kind of scheme they run with Jonathan Gannon, and that's not something that people necessarily consider when you're going to talk about a team's offseason is, well, if they change the way they're going to do things, it may change the kind of personnel they want. You know, college programs go through that all the time when they're changing head coaches or changing defensive coordinators. It changes the way that they recruit. It changes the way that they bring in guys in the transfer portal. Yeah. If they're running a completely different scheme, it changed a lot. The NFL will be no different, and I do think that kind of decides on how do you want to approach Quay Walker. Is that a guy that Jonathan Gannon likes? I went back and looked at like Arizona free agents, and there are none that really kind of pop off the page for guys that should come over with Jonathan Gannon.
Not surprising that team sucked.
Yeah, and it will continue to suck, sadly. Brandon McManus is also a talking point for contract decisions. He's not a free agent, but it feels like he choked your season. And he also had kicking, struggles throughout the year.
Yeah.
It feels like competition's needed in-house, at least have some kind of kicking competition in OTAs next year, which means they may end up cutting him. He's due for like $5 million next year, which I think they can save I think the number was $3 million if they cut him. But that'll be kind of a decision, and those are the main decisions that they got to make for them this year. Any kind of, I know you touched on Rashawn Gary, but any approaches you would have there on those kinds of guys?
No, I'm of the opinion, I think they're probably of the opinion that, hey, we get Micah Parsons back, we get Tucker Kraft back. We don't really need any more, splash moves.
Yeah.
Maybe, one. But, let's just get that. We can fill in around the edges. We have our stars in place. We have Jordan Love. Sure, we don't have a first-round draft pick, but that's more than worth it to get Micah Parsons. We were 9-3-1, and it was our first year with Micah Parsons, and like we said, he got off to a slow start. Let's largely run it back. The one question I do have for you,
Sure.
They picked up Trevon Diggs. He didn't really play, but any world you think where they technically bring him back?
I'd be shocked if they do.
Sure.
Even, with their need at corner, I wouldn't personally. I hope they don't. As a semi-Packers guy,
Yeah.
I wouldn't. He was really, really bad for Dallas last year. There's a reason he was waived and placed on waivers and then eventually claimed by Green Bay. It's because he was terrible.
Yeah.
Especially early on in the year. There were just things he was doing that made no sense in terms of just X and O's wise. You're in cover 3. You have to be your own deep safety. That does not mean that the interior safety gets to slide over and help you if you want to try and bait a throw for whatever reason, which he is good at baiting. Some would say, no, I'm not going to say that. That's a stupid joke. Master.
That's exactly where I knew you were going. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that, though.
Yeah.
Not live on air.
Sure.
But there were decisions like that made no sense, and he would give up touchdowns for free. I wouldn't bring him back. I hope they don't. That would not be where I would go. For free agency, last year they made a few big moves that didn't really help. They tried to make some splash moves to fill immediate needs. They brought in Nate Hobbs to a 4-year, $45 million contract.
Yeah.
He did not play well. He was expensive, and he was hurt much of the year. He's due $10 million again next year. Another signing was Aaron Banks. Do you even know what position that guy plays?
Mm-mm.
No, he played. Well, he was going to play right tackle for them. he was not good last year, and he's the third highest paid guy on their roster next year.
Yeah.
Which is diabolical. So I do think they're going to have some hesitancy in free agency in terms of signing some big guys, even with their ability to potentially free up cap space. They're also they can't be too big into this year, and so one of the reasons I think they should approach guys that are veterans and are sign them to 1 and maybe a second-year deal is because their money is about to increase big time in the future in terms of how much they're paying guys. And Micah Parsons and Jordan Love, those contracts tick up big over the next 2 to 3 years. They become really, really large numbers. So they won't have as much room and flexibility, especially if you're going to try to re-sign a Christian Watson, who will be a free agent after next season.
Sure.
Or Tucker Kraft, who will be a free agent after next season as well, if I'm not mistaken. So I think for this team, free agency-wise, go after veterans with your win-now team. I think Calais Campbell, of the guys of the Arizona Cardinals that I do think they should try to get, Calais Campbell would be one if he wants to play another year and he can, play with Jonathan Gannon. But other guys like Bobby Wagner, Levante David, Demario Davis, Matt Milano, Alex Anzalone, all 5 of those guys are guys who are, if you do not bring back Quay Walker, who was their middle linebacker for much of the year, those 5 guys could replace that and replenish that for the year. And then you could maybe approach that in the draft 2 years from now or 3 years from now. I do think those are the kinds of guys you try to prioritize is old guys who are in their last or second to last year on 1-year contracts. Outside of that, I think the only other need is prioritizing a backup quarterback.
Yeah.
And a backup running back. Because the backup to Josh Jacobs was not very good this year, and Emmanuel Wilson, and I think Marshawn Lloyd was the other guy's name. Neither of them were great. Josh Jacobs, with how many carries he gets, he is going to be
He's going to miss a couple games,
more injury risk going forward. And then Jordan Love has missed 2 games in each of the last 2 seasons. A game and a half, I guess you could count this year with half a game against Chicago. But they're also critical games.
There's no room for error in this division.
Yeah, they did well in those games. They were 3-1 in those games, but they can't afford to lose games because it was really Malik Willis that played well in those 2 games, which is why he's going to get the big contract. They need to find some kind of backup for Jordan. Maybe Aaron Rodgers, free agent. Imagine. That'd be
wild.
Actually diabolical. That'd be one of the more shocking NFL stories ever. But I do think someone for Jordan Love as a backup is a must because Clayton Tune, I don't think you can expect him to be your quarterback going forward. Maybe it's a guy they draft, but starting a rookie as your backup is really kind of tough.
Yeah.
So I would try to go after someone in free agency. Any other free agents you would see?
I think that sums it up.
Yeah, for early realistic goal next year, it is be better than a 7 seed.
I love it.
If the playoffs, like I had said earlier, had not been expanded 5 years ago, Matt LaFleur would still not have reached the postseason.
And do you think, therefore, he would be fired?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is crazy.
That was something I wrote. I meant to mention it. He'd probably be fired.
Instead of getting the extension.
And instead he gets extended. The Cowboys would have won a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
I'll forever hold that. Jokes, of course. But he's extended because the playoffs were expanded. I wonder if that'll happen eventually for the Atlanta Hawks, Chicago Bulls, or Miami Heat with the play-in, with it being extended. Oh, we make the play-in every single year.
I love all the bits that are like the Hornets have crept up into the play-in, and all those teams being like, "What do you think you're doing here?" You think you're a hot shot all of a sudden.
Those are hilarious. Green Bay doesn't want to be part of the play-in crowd anymore, and of course they still got to be in the postseason and won a playoff game, but they need to be better than a 7 seed, even if they're a 5 seed. Like I do think they can make a run, because it seems like every single year we're going to have a division that's just point-blank terrible, have a point-blank terrible division champion, which I hate.
Yeah.
Because it will continue like the narrative of, oh, we need to get rid of divisions getting a home playoff game.
Yeah.
Which I think is one of the best things about NFL football. So be better than a 7 seed. I think it's the realistic goal for next year. And I do think they got the pieces to do it. Micah Parsons, Tucker Kraft, heard me questions at the beginning of the season. But Jordan Love did not regress this year. I'm looking at you, Sanders, who's not here, of course, but he had a good year, and he had a great playoff game, and that was kind of lost in that Caleb Williams comeback, was how well Jordan Love had played. I do think that this is the team that wins the Super Bowl next year.
Okay, early call. See, Jackson thinks they're getting last in the division in chat. So
Okay.
y'all are at odds there.
Big time.
He probably thinks Nine's winning MVP and the Vikings are winning the Super Bowl.
Is he coming this weekend?
He's not going to be here.
I was going to have to discuss that with him this weekend then.
His reasonings. But yeah, cool. That's really it then.
Yeah.
We can wrap it up unless you have anything else you want to add. I did watch the video.
The Jonathan Gannon
video, which is really bad, and everyone's reactions, you can just tell how bad it is. Everyone's so confused at what's going on. He also just doesn't say it with any conviction. There's no he's talking about lighting a fire, and it's you don't have the fire in your gut. But I just wanted this guy's hat. I don't know who it is.
I'm pretty sure that's Hollywood Brown.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And he's got the 2 chain on, but the fact he's just wearing this big old straw hat
That is
in
hilarious.
the team meeting room, it just it jumped out to me. It's all right, bro. But yeah, thanks everyone who tuned in. Subscribe if you're still watching. It really means a lot. All the support. We'll be back for you all Thursday to do. I'm not sure who. I think we have 5 teams left, and they're kind of scattered around.
Seahawks, Patriots.
Yep. There's
it's one of our the NFC East.
Yep, the
It was
Eagles and
Eagles,
Giants.
Cowboys, Giants.
We've done Cowboys.
Oh, Schubert.
So I think there's a 5th team somewhere. Excuse me.
Well, we're gonna have to double check.
Figure
on
it
that.
out. Yeah. But those 4 teams plus another, and then JP's idea. But we're gonna discuss and reveal our 3 best takes leading into the season, and our 3 worst takes leading into the season, as we kind of wrap up this NFL cycle. And
NFL, and I would, if you want to, you can approach college. With that as well,
sure.
If there are ones.
I may look into that. Then I probably have a couple better college takes than I had NFL takes.
Yeah,
so we'll
football
see.
in general.
Football takes in general. 3 best, 3 worst. As we kind of shut the door on this season. Football won't go away on this channel. The draft is about to start, but that's next year stuff. So look forward to seeing y'all Thursday for that. Peace.
Later.